Bruce Lee set houses on fire for the thrill of it, the excitement of the blaze. Some of those fires caused damage, some caused death. This is the story of the Hull Firestarter. Hi everybody, Matt and Tom back with you. We're back on home turf. We're in Hull and we're heading to Hessle Road. If you've not watched any of our Hull videos before, you won't know that both Tom and I are from here. I was born here but adopted, whereas Tom was brought up here. And let me explain what we're doing here today. If you look up serial killers on, let's say, Google or something like that, what you will find are the usual suspects. Shipman, Fred West, John Christie, maybe even recently Lucy Letby. But I looked it up today on the 20 that it lists, and it doesn't mention one man. That man's name is Bruce Peter Lee. Now, he was from Hull, and at the time of his conviction, he was regarded as the man with the most convictions ever, because there were 26 murder convictions on his record when he was jailed in the early 80s. But nobody knows about him. In fact, for murderers in the 20th century, only Shipman is listed as more, and obviously he has over 200 victims to his name. Unbelievably, Bruce Lee's first murder was committed when he was only 12 years old and stopped when he was 19. Lee is still alive, incarcerated permanently, though some of the deaths on his record have been appealed and won, bringing the total number down in the decades that followed his arrest. But why is it that people don't know about the Hull Firestarter when, you constantly hear of Shipman, Fred West, even Jack the Ripper or the Yorkshire Ripper? So in this video we're going to walk around Hull and we're going to look at the locations today where Bruce Lee committed his crimes in the 1970s. See what's there today, and that's quite useful having Tom here because he knows the area very well. And we're going to look at the story and also try and figure out exactly what happened and why it is you have probably never heard of Bruce Lee and not that one. On the 4th of December 1979, a fire broke out in the house of the Hasty family at number 2 Selby Street in Hull in the very early hours of the morning. In the house was Mrs. Hasty and her 4 sons. Mrs. Hasty awoke to the fire burning from the downstairs hallway and up the stairs. All the members in the household had to escape from the upstairs window. However, over the next few days, 3 of the 4 children, Paul, Peter and Charles Hasty, all died from their burns and injuries. An investigation into the fire concluded that paraffin had been poured through the letterbox and lit with a newspaper that was on fire. An incident room was set up. No one in the local area had come to help the Hasties. There was a great deal of animosity towards the family on Selby Street and beyond. The detectives investigating the case found that the community hated the Hasties, and a note scribbled on a box and found in their house after the fire read, "A family of f***ing rubbish," We all hate you. You should live on Devil's Island. At the funeral for the boys, their mother shouted at the crowd that had gathered to witness the event and screamed at them, "One of you did this." The murder investigation took a strange twist when it was discovered that the oldest boy, Charles, aged only 15, had actually been engaged in numerous homosexual activities with older men at a nearby toilet block on Anlaby Road. The police gathered the names of 40 men that they wished to speak to, that Charles Hasty may have had contact with in those toilets. One by one the men were arrested, and in a unique procedure, the detectives, led by Detective Sager, immediately blamed each suspect for the crime, saying, "I believe you were responsible for the killing of the 3 boys." One of these men was a 19-year-old who'd been born Peter Dinsdale, now going by the name Bruce Lee after his hero, answered, "I didn't mean it." Lee claimed that Charles Hasty had asked for money after each sexual encounter they'd had. It was like blackmail to pay for his silence. Fed up and angry, Lee had obtained paraffin and gone to Selby Street, poured it through the letterbox, lit a newspaper, and pushed that through as well. The interview continued, and the police sat stunned and shocked as Lee confessed to a decade of fires and murders across Hull that had seen 26 people die, and make Bruce Lee one of the UK's most prolific serial killers of the 20th century. The choice of his victims was motiveless, mindless, and random. "I am devoted to fire," he said. "Fire is my master." During the questioning at the police station, Lee confessed to 9 more fatal fires across Hull over the last decade. None of the fires had been treated with suspicion before, but the fires had claimed 26 lives, ranging from a 6-month-old baby, a mother and 3 children, to 11 old men killed together in a residential home fire at Wensley Lodge. Many more had suffered life-altering burns or injuries. The police drove Bruce Lee through Hull, where he would point out locations he claimed responsibility for. A check found that these locations had indeed been on fire in the past. The police did a test. They took Lee to the scene of a fire where the culprit had already been caught. But Lee ruled out his involvement in that fire, and the police therefore seemed destined to believe in the stories that he was saying. He showed locations including shops and warehouses where he'd started fires, but they had been non-fatal. So obviously what we have to remember is that bad fires occurred at these places. Sometimes they may have disappeared altogether after the fire, or obviously we are now 50 years on from the happenings and places change. So where are we here?
We are in the Great Thornton Estate, and we're looking for where Troutbeck House might have been. Now I think Troutbeck House goes from a road over there and backs onto Cavill Place. And this is Cavill Place.
Okay. Linnaeus Street.
So this is where Bruce Lee lived. at the time that he was caught.
Okay.
And also where Troutbeck House, which was one of the...
Yeah, the ones he set on fire. But didn't have... There were no deaths at Troutbeck House, but there was obviously attempted. So, he was here somewhere. But again, this is possibly all very different to what it was in the 70s.
In the 70s, I think it had some old maisonettes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. How many houses across Hull in the 70s looked like this after a visit from the Firestarter? Right, so we're on Madeley Street and 50 Humber buildings, which we do have an old picture of, and we're next to a church?
The old city temple.
Right, which looks like that might have been burnt out as well.
That was a theatre school at the time called Studio, well it was Northern Theatre.
Oh right, okay. So 50 Humber buildings, 1973, on a ground floor flat. Which we think was pretty much where the flyover is now. This is where one person died here called David Brewer. Bruce Lee set fire to his clothes that were drying in his room. He poured paraffin over them and set them alight, and he was in the house at the same time. But yeah, long gone. But we do have a picture of what they looked like. This area is where we think the Wesley Lodge care home was, which on the 5th of January 1977 was set alight. Sadly, 11 of its residents, aged between 70 to 90, lost their lives that night in the fire that took place there. So Hessel Road, Tom, this is where you're from?
Is where a lot of my family are from, yeah.
Right.
I used to have a theatre company up here and a studio just off Silver Street a little bit later.
Okay.
And,
so we might see those a bit later. Tell me what this is.
This is a roll of honour for the street of all the people that were lost in presumably World War One, and there's lots of them on different streets in Hull.
Oh wow! So instead of one big memorial, it's a street memorial. Wow, right, that's interesting. Never seen that anywhere else. So Eaton Street's Roll of Honour. See if we find any more of those as we wander around. Now we're on West Dock Avenue. 2nd of January 1977. Bruce Lee sprinkled paraffin in number 43 West Dock Avenue, and a 5-month-old Katrina Thacker sadly lost her life in that fire.
Oh yeah, we've been here before.
Yeah. So this is West Dock Avenue. As you can see, it is not in a good way. Now there are no other houses really, it's all industrial. These are the only houses. So potentially one of these, but
one like these.
or one like these, yeah, from long ago. Yeah, okay. So now we're on Rosamond Street, and this was the site of 2 fires. Let's see if we can figure out where they were. So we're on Rosamond Street, and there were 2 fires down here. However, 50 years have gone past, and Rosamond Street now ends here and becomes Sefton Street. So what would have been on here were Minnis Terrace and Belgrave Terrace. Minnis Terrace saw the death in 1974 of Elizabeth Roker, who was 82, and then tragically 1977, 2 deaths at Belgrave Terrace. Deborah Gold only 13 and Mark Jordan only 7. And their father Peter Jordan had nodded off on the settee and woke to the room in flames. Once again, another house that Bruce Lee had got into with his paraffin bottle. What a shame to see these so badly damaged. Graves graffitied on. Glasgow Street, 12th of October 1973, number 33 Glasgow Street. Bruce Lee was only 13 years old. And in the house, Arthur Smythe, age 72, lost his life. Yeah, once again, 33 would have been on our right. As you can see, the houses on the right are newer compared to the ones on the left. So again, Glasgow Street, yeah, no sign of 33 anymore. So we're now on Selby Street, and on here a bit further down we will find the location of where the Hasty family had their fire. And this building here, after the boys and the mother had jumped out of the window, they were brought here apparently. Let's see if the Hasty house still exists. Yes, so this is Selby Street, and the house on the corner there, that is the house that the Hasty family escaped from. So if there is a fire, so if that is number 12, where the Hasties were, the police wanted to track somebody down, didn't they?
They did, who was standing on that flyover over there, looking over at that house, banging on the metal railings, saying 1 down, 4 to go.
Gosh.
It was a man in his 60s.
Right, so it wasn't the man who'd committed the crime, but it was probably one of the locals fed up of the terrorism of the Hasty family that was happening here at the time. So this old cinema, did you say your grandma worked in here?
My grandma worked there in the 1930s.
Wow.
Martin Freeman's grandparents, I saw on Who Do You Think You Are, were blind buskers in front of there.
Wow, brilliant. Okay, so we're now on a place called Anlamy Road, and as we mentioned in the kind of videos package at the beginning, what they found out was that Charles Hasty, who was only 15, was up to a lot of, let's call it indecent activity with quite a lot of men, and would often head into toilets which we think possibly that haircut building over there, and the police came and staked it out and caught roughly 40 men who would have been in those toilets, getting up to all sorts of things with Charles Hasty, and all those men were taken in for questioning. So yeah, so the building over there, if it is that one, definitely has pretty bad history.
I think that's supposed to be Clive Sullivan,
Okay.
a Welshman who played for both teams.
Right.
The road into Hull is called the Clive Sullivan nowadays.
Okay.
Here is Jack Harrison, VCE,
Right.
Victoria. He was a real hero. Amy Johnson at the end.
Yeah. You. It's you. This is where they had the incident room. Would make sense because it's at the police station, and that's where they spoke to the public and found out about what had been going on in that area. Bit of your history?
Yes, we used to have a studio in there and community plays.
Wow.
As a plays.
An old school. Cool. Location we didn't visit today was Brentwood Villas, where January 1978 Bruce Lee caused the death of 4 people: Christine Dixon and her 3 children aged 4, 3 and 16 months. Once again, he'd poured paraffin through the letterbox and lit it. So, also just off Hessel Road, we're on Askew Avenue at number 70. One death occurred here of a 6-year-old, Richard Ellerington. Paraffin was once again poured, this time onto the kitchen floor through an open window. But this area is known as what?
Gypsyville.
And that's not a derogatory term, it is actually called Gypsyville.
Because of the working horses.
Ah, right. The fire on Askew Avenue ended up being the first death that Bruce Lee caused. He was only 12 years old. So 70 would be just on this area here. So why isn't Bruce Lee, the serial killer, better known? And I'm sure it's not just because of his name. Well, there might be a number of reasons. Here's a few that I've thought of. Number 1, his trial was going on at the exact same time of the Yorkshire Ripper trial, Peter Sutcliffe. That was a very, very high profile case that took up the papers, and there wasn't really room for anything else at the time. And so that could be one reason. Secondly, maybe it's because all charges were listed as manslaughter, not murder, because they decided to put in a plea for manslaughter for diminished responsibility. Yet you would have thought the papers would have picked up on more convictions than any other person at that time. thirdly, was that the consensus seemed to be at the time that apart from a hasty family, there'd been no intention to kill with the other victims, that Bruce was really only causing the fire. He hadn't intended to murder. Of course, I think that could be debatable. Fourthly, Bruce was seen as a sympathetic character. He was young. All his crimes had been taking place between the ages of 12 to 19, and brought up in a bad area at the time, moved from children home to children home, suffered from epilepsy and spasms and had a low IQ. Many claimed that his physical and mental disabilities would have meant that he couldn't possibly have even committed the crimes. Now, at the time, Bruce Lee claimed that he wanted to be famous and that he had definitely committed all the crimes, and by admitting it, it would make him this notorious serial killer. And over time, he changed his mind and he decided to then appeal the convictions. And over the decades that have followed, since 1981, a number of those convictions that he was found guilty of were overturned. These included the fire that killed the 11 gentlemen at the old people's care home, so they were stricken from the record. However, there is no escaping the fact that Bruce Lee still has today 12 murders to his name, which puts him on the same level as, the Yorkshire Ripper and Fred West and those much more notorious names that we know. Okay, so that concludes our little story about Bruce Lee, the serial killer, and his links to various locations in Hull. Thank you so much for being a great tour guide, showing us all the way around, all the locations. Yeah, as expected, after 50 years, most of them are now totally gone. So, we've often said in this video, Bruce Lee, the forgotten killer. Have you ever heard the story? Or maybe, even though it's 50 years ago, maybe you have some of your own memories and thoughts and stories from the time. If you're watching this in Hull, perhaps, maybe you can comment below and let us know. But in the meantime, do remember to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, share, all the usual stuff, and we will see you very soon for the next video. So please take care, and bye for now.